Not only is Michael Jackson arguably the greatest artist of all time, he is also arguably the most interesting. Welcome to my Michael Jackson Iceberg series. Right off the top, I want to make it clear that this iceberg is coming from a place of respect. Michael had a complicated life to say the least, and dealt with many struggles and personal problems, which I will discuss later into the iceberg. There have actually been a few other Michael Jackson icebergs on YouTube, but I don't think that they are anywhere near as in-depth as they should be, which is why I felt like I should tackle this myself. I've actually planned on doing this series for a few years now at this point, and I think that with Michael, the biopic, dropping in April, this could be a good opportunity to highlight MJ's life and legacy when there's a lot of interest. Given Michael's insane number of hits and iconic songs, very few songs will have their own entries on the iceberg. Instead, I will be covering the significant hits and other tracks when we get around to covering those studio albums, which will also highlight music videos and live performances and other relevant content. Of course, the more obscure and interesting tangential stories during these eras aren't going to be limited to those album entries. Those will get their own entries deeper into the iceberg. Effectively, this first layer is just to establish the context of Michael's life and career. Given that Michael Jackson is the most famous artist in the history of recorded music, a lot of the stuff in the first layer is obviously going to be stuff most of you will be well aware of. But I'm going to cover each and every one because they are all extremely important parts of his career and legacy. Throughout this iceberg series, I'm going to frequently highlight the ways Michael Jackson directly influenced artists that came after him. No single person has influenced so many different facets of pop culture like Michael Jackson did, and I'm going to break it all down here in this iceberg series. Without further ado, let's dive in. Layer 1. Thriller. It goes without saying, but this is Michael Jackson's magnum opus. The album was released on November 29th, 1982. To this day, Thriller remains the best-selling album of all time, and it was truly the career moment where Michael Jackson went from being known from his time in the Jackson 5 to attaining legendary status as a solo artist, because the music itself and everything that went along with it was that incredible. The success of the album was no accident, as Michael Jackson had a vision. He wanted to top his previous solo effort by making the most successful album of all time. Even if somehow you haven't sat down to listen to the album front to back, no matter what age you are, you're already gonna know basically every single song. This was Michael's second solo album working with producer Quincy Jones, whom he met on the set of The Wiz, the musical Michael starred in. The most significant songs being Wanna Be Startin' Something, Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, and PYT. But even beyond those, this is one of those albums where literally any of the songs could have been a hit single. The run from Thriller to PYT in particular is absolutely incredible. Those are 5 of the greatest pop songs of all time, back to back to back to back. Of course, it was during the Thriller era that Michael Jackson revolutionized the music video and what it could be. He didn't invent the music video in the literal sense, but he absolutely created music videos as we know them today. Before 1983, oftentimes music videos would just be glorified lip-synced live performances. But Michael set the standard that these videos should be works of art that stand on their own, or short films, as he refers to them. There are 3 iconic music videos off of this album. In release order, we got Billie Jean, Beat It, and of course, easily the most iconic music video of all time with Thriller. These music videos are where Michael Jackson transformed his music into something greater, a visual world and narrative that defined pop culture at the time. And the budget fit Michael Jackson's vision. The video, directed by John Landis, ran 13 minutes long and cost $500,000 to produce. It was the most expensive music video ever made at the time, and I think it's safe to say it was worth every penny. On top of this, Michael broke racial barriers with these videos as well. In the early 1980s, black artists were very underrepresented on MTV, But Michael Jackson was one of the first to open the floodgates for black artists. After the music video released on December 2nd, 1983, over a year after the release of the Thriller album, Epic Records reportedly began shipping 1 million copies of the album a week immediately after the video was released, just to meet the demand. Not to mention, the documentary about the making of the music video, which was made to help fund the production, also became the best-selling videotape ever at the time. It's also worth noting that Michael really flexed his songwriting talent on this album, as he wrote Wanna Be Startin' Something, The Girl Is Mine, Beat It, and Billie Jean all by himself. In this demo for Billie Jean, you can hear that Michael had a clear vision for the song right from the get-go, before he even got in the studio with Quincy Jones.
Careful what you do, better cover do. Billie Jean's not my love. She's just a girl that says that I'm the one you know. The kid is not my son.
We'll come back to this fact, but Michael Jackson had the insane ability to compose music in his head. With Billie Jean specifically, he said that he actually came up with the bass line for that while he was driving. There was no tour for the album, but Michael performed songs from it when he went on a tour with his brothers for the Victory Tour in 1984. And now some more details about songs that didn't get music videos. The opening track, Wanna Be Startin' Something, became a live staple for Michael Jackson shows, and it's up there with the best opening tracks to any album ever, if you ask me. Also, The Girl Is Mine, his duet with Paul McCartney, was actually the album's first single, and to this day, a lot of people consider it to be the weakest song on the album. I think it's great though. The importance of Thriller, the album, cannot be overstated. Simply put, it is the blueprint for pop stars to this day. What this album achieved on a cultural level was unprecedented. It was everywhere. As of right now, the album has sold around 70 million copies worldwide. To this day, it is the best-selling album in the world. Oh, and did I mention he was only 24 years old when the album was released? Insane. The Moonwalk. Another iconic moment that came about in the Thriller era was the 1983 TV special Motown 25. A broadcast where artists celebrated the 25th anniversary of the founding of Motown Records at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. It was not broadcast live, but it pulled in over 30 million viewers when it premiered on TV. Among this set of performances would be, without exaggeration, one of the most important moments in pop culture history: Michael Jackson debuting the Moonwalk during a performance of Billie Jean. This moment wasn't just significant for its dancing, but Michael's fashion choices too. He wore the famous glove on his left hand, the fedora, the sequined jacket, and he made wearing white socks with black shoes cool again. Michael didn't invent the moonwalk. It was a move created by street dancers years before, but he definitely perfected it and made it iconic. Michael Jackson is an incredible dancer, to say the least, and the moonwalk is his most famous move. On each and every tour after this, whenever he would do Billie Jean live, he would do the moonwalk during the bridge, just like he did on the legendary Motown 25 performance. The King of Pop. As the single most famous and influential pop star of all time, Michael Jackson is the undisputed King of Pop. But people didn't start giving him that title until Michael's friend, actress Elizabeth Taylor, coined the phrase when she presented him with an award at the Soul Train Music Awards in 1989.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 1989 Heritage Award and Sammy Davis Jr. Award recipient, and in my estimation, the true king of pop, rock, and soul, Mr. Michael Jackson.
And ever since then, the title stuck, appropriately so. The Jackson 5 / the Jacksons. Now, I could make an entire video essay about the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons. That's how much lore there is to cover. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep this relatively brief. Where Michael Jackson's musical journey all started was with 4 of his brothers as the Jackson 5. At just 5 years old, Michael became a part of the group that would later take the world by storm. In Michael Jackson's 1988 autobiography, he recalls his earliest memories of being a part of the group. I remember singing at the top of my voice and dancing with real joy and working too hard for a child. Of course, there are many details I don't remember at all. I do remember the Jackson 5 really taking off when I was only 8 or 9. The group was formed in the family's hometown of Gary, Indiana in 1964. In the band, we of course have Michael Jackson on lead vocals, Jackie and Marlon Jackson on percussion, Jermaine on bass, and Tito on guitar. Randy Jackson would later come into the fold, playing with the band on tour in the early 70s, then officially joining the band in 1975. Back to the earlier days of the group, in March of 1969, Berry Gordy signed the group to Motown Records. And another important person to mention is singer and Motown label mate Diana Ross of The Supremes, who supported the group in their early days, as the family would split time living at her home and Berry Gordy's home, once they moved from Gary, Indiana to Southern California. In Moonwalk, Michael recalls, "This was an important period in my life because Diana loved art and encouraged me to appreciate it too. She took the time to educate me about it. We'd go out almost every day, just the two of us, and buy pencils and paint. When we weren't drawing or painting, we'd go to museums. She introduced me to the works of great artists like Michelangelo and Degas, and that was the start of my lifelong interest in art. She really taught me a great deal." Diana Ross effectively co-signed the group, with their first album being titled Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. Even if you haven't taken a deep dive into the Jackson 5 discography, you already know their huge hits like I Want You Back, ABC, I'll Be There, and plenty others. I Want You Back was their debut single, and found much success as the brothers went on TV to perform the track on The Ed Sullivan Show, amidst other promotion.
When I had you to myself, I don't want you around. Those pretty faces always made you stand out in the crowd. But someone picked you from the bunch when glam was all it took.
One thing that is worth noting, however, not as a diss to their credibility, just an explanation of how Motown ran things at the time, the Jackson brothers didn't write any of the Jackson 5 songs. Berry Gordy was very particular with how things were run at his label, and that meant hiring great songwriters for their talent, or just have them do covers. For the Jackson 5, a group of songwriters under the name The Corporation wrote a lot of their songs. And those songwriters were Berry Gordy, Alfonso Mazel, Freddie Perrin, and Deke Richards. They wrote a bunch of Jackson 5 songs, but hits like I Want You Back, ABC, and The Love You Save were all written by them. They were a songwriting powerhouse, to say the least. The group released 10 studio albums under the name Jackson 5, and released 6 albums as The Jacksons after they left Motown. The remaining Jackson family. Because of the fame that came with the Jackson 5 and the later solo careers of the Jackson children, the Jackson family and their history are frequently discussed for just how unique their circumstances were. In Gary, Indiana, the family of 11 lived in a home with just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, before later moving to Havenhurst, their home in Encino, California in 1971. Before we address the rest of Michael's siblings, let's talk about his parents. His mother, Katherine Jackson, and father, Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson is a controversial figure, to say the least. On one hand, he was instrumental in getting the brothers in the Jackson 5 together to rehearse and become the amazing performers they became. But on the other hand, he was an abusive parent, and as Michael recounts in his autobiography, the abuse was intertwined with the rehearsals for the Jackson 5. Soon Dad was grooming us for talent contests. He was a great trainer, and he spent a lot of money and time working with us. Talent is something that God gives to a person, but our father taught us how to cultivate it. I think we also had a certain instinct for show business. We loved to perform, and we put everything we had into it. He'd sit at home with us every day after school and rehearse us. We'd perform for him, and he'd critique us. If you messed up, you got hit. Sometimes with a belt, sometimes with a switch. My father was real strict with us. Real strict. Marlon was the one who got in trouble all the time. On the other hand, I'd get beaten for things that happened mostly outside rehearsal. Dad would make me so mad and hurt that I'd try to get back at him and get beaten all the more. I'd take a shoe and throw it at him, or I'd just fight back, swinging my fists. That's why I got it more than all my brothers combined. I would fight back and my father would kill me, just tear me up. Mother told me I'd fight back even when I was very little, but I don't remember that. I do remember running under tables to get away from him, and making him angrier. We had a turbulent relationship. On top of the physical abuse, Joe Jackson did not let any of his kids call him Dad. He made them call him Joseph. The fear Joe Jackson instilled in his family clearly affected them for their whole lives. Joe Jackson died in June of 2018 from pancreatic cancer. His wife, Katherine Jackson, however, is still alive today. While Joe Jackson handled the business side of the family's music endeavors, Katherine's main focus was life at home and raising the kids. Again, from Michael's autobiography, Moonwalk, he describes the family's relationship with Katherine. My mother was a great provider. If she found out that one of us had an interest in something, she would encourage it if there was any possible way. If I developed an interest in movie stars, for instance, she'd come home with an armful of books about famous stars. Even with 9 children, she treated each of us like an only child. There isn't one of us who's ever forgotten what a hard worker and a great provider she was. It's an old story. Every child thinks their mother is the greatest mother in the world, but we Jacksons never lost that feeling. Because of Katherine's gentleness, warmth, and attention, I can't imagine what it must be like to grow up without a mother's love. Now, moving on to the second most famous member of the Jackson family, who I have not mentioned at all yet, the youngest in the family, Janet Jackson. While many members of the Jackson family pursued solo careers just like Michael did, the only one that came anywhere near close to Michael's impact on music and pop culture is that of Janet Jackson. Things really began to take off for her in the late 1980s with her album Control. Then she sustained that success with the pop masterpiece that is Rhythm Nation 1814. And in the years after, she had an incredible career, releasing more incredible albums. The 90s was another classic period for her in particular. And in the late 90s, of course, came an excellent collaboration with Michael, Scream. I feel like some of Janet's impact gets overshadowed by Michael sometimes, considering he is the literal king of pop. But it must be acknowledged that much like how Michael became the blueprint for pop stars with Thriller, Janet became the blueprint for a lot of female pop stars when she became world famous. Just think of how clear you can see the artistic lineage of Janet Jackson in the work of Britney Spears and Beyoncé, for example. Her influence is absolutely everywhere. There is so much more than just the Britney and Beyoncé examples. I just think that it says a lot that 2 of the greatest pop stars alive today were strongly influenced by Janet. There is so much more I could get into with Janet, but I'm going to save that for another video. LaToya Jackson is one of the more public-facing members of the family. She pursued her own solo career and has remained visible through various forms of media over the years. Her 1988 album LaToya included the song Just Say No, which coincided with her role as a celebrity spokesperson for the Just Say No campaign pushed by the Reagan administration in the 80s. And finally, Rebby Jackson. Rebby is actually the oldest child in the Jackson family. While she is one of the less public-facing members of the family, she also had her own solo career as a singer. Her 1984 album Centipede is worth highlighting, as its title track was written and produced by her brother Michael. Vitiligo. Over the decades, Michael's physical appearance was often discussed, questioned, and scrutinized by the media and the public. The clearest and most obvious change, of course, was his skin tone. In 1986, Michael Jackson was officially diagnosed with vitiligo, which is an autoimmune disorder that causes skin to lose its color or pigment. When his album Bad released in 1987, Michael had not publicly disclosed his condition, confusing the public and the media, which led to speculation running wild. It wasn't until 1993, when he did a sit-down interview with Oprah, that he talked about it publicly.
Okay, number one, this is the situation. I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help. Okay, but When people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
So it is.
It's a problem for me, okay? I can't control it, okay? But what about all the millions of people? Let's reverse it.
Okay.
What about all the millions of people who sit out in the sun to become darker, to become other than what they are? Nobody says nothing about that.
So when
I'm a black American. I'm proud to be a black American. I am proud of my race. I am proud of who I am. I have a lot of pride in who I am and dignity.
Bad. Bad was released on August 31st, 1987, nearly 5 years after Thriller. After the incredible success of Thriller, Michael was under a lot of pressure to follow it up. Just think about it. You release the best-selling album of all time, and the public is hungry for more. However, he took his time with this one, and he teamed up with Quincy Jones for the last time. Michael initially envisioned the album as being a much bigger project. At one point, he had even written enough songs for a triple album's worth of material. But Quincy Jones convinced him to cut down all the songs he wrote into just one album worth of material, which is what we ended up getting, the concise track listing of 11 songs that make up Bad. Needless to say, Bad shaped up to be another monumental project for Michael. It did not exceed the sales of Thriller, which he hoped for, but it absolutely was a worthy successor of an album, and it completely took over the charts at the time. Bad presented a different image of Michael than what we got before. This time around, his outfits were edgier, some of the music videos dealt with darker themes, and the music itself started to have a whole lot more aggression in it. By this point, the wholesome image that carried him throughout the Jackson 5 days into his early solo career was gone, in favor of something much bolder. Like how The Girl Is Mine was the first single for Thriller, the label did not go with a high-energy pop song as the first single for Bad. They ended up going with Michael's duet with Sita Garrett, I Just Can't Stop Loving You. This song, along with the next 4 singles from the album, all hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Another incredible feat from Michael Jackson. The heavy hitter singles started coming afterwards, with the title track, Bad, released as the second single, alongside an incredible music video directed by none other than Martin Scorsese. As a video, this is one of his most iconic, but as a song, I honestly find it to be a bit underrated in the fandom. Definitely top 5 MJ for me. The third single was the iconic The Way You Make Me Feel. Fourth is his most famous ballad, Man in the Mirror, and fifth was the rock cut, Dirty Diana. And shockingly, the sixth single, Smooth Criminal, did not make it to #1. It peaked at #7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Regardless, everybody knows that this is one of Michael's signature songs. Along with the Bad era came his first ever solo tour, with over 120 dates across North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Ad-libs. Arguably just as iconic as some of Michael's dance moves are his vocal ad-libs that came to fruition from the off-the-wall era through the Bad era. You know them all, they're all iconic.
It makes me feel like that. Jump on, get on me, all right.
A lot of these hit at Michael's approach to vocalization, like percussive type stuff. It gives his delivery like such a raw, visceral feel from the Bad era onward. But some of these ad-libs are clear inspirations from other artists, like Hee Hee came from Stevie Wonder, and Shimon came from Mavis Staples.
Help me, come on, somebody help me now.
And like, if you go really deep into the discography, you can spot little instances where he uses these ad-libs differently. Like on the song Who Is It from Dangerous, where the hee-hees feel really dark. Just think about how prevalent ad-libs are in pop and rap music nowadays. MJ was absolutely a pioneer of making these sounds a part of his creative identity. They are unmistakably him. Off the Wall. Even though this was his 5th solo album, we're gonna get to the previous albums in layer 2 of the Iceberg. In most people's minds, this is really where Michael Jackson took off as a solo artist. For all intents and purposes, his previous solo albums were when the public still viewed him as the young man from the Jackson 5. But it is with Off the Wall that he started to morph into the king of pop. This is the album Michael wanted to be the biggest album ever. Even though it was great and successful, it didn't quite live up to those expectations. Michael was disappointed when it did not win Album of the Year at the Grammys, for example, which lit the fire under his ass to make the masterpiece that is Thriller. In 1979, he wrote a letter to himself, manifesting the success that would come his way. This is one of my favorite examples of Michael's incredible vision. It reads, "MJ will be my new name. No more Michael Jackson. I want a whole new character, a whole new look. I should be a totally different person. People should never think of me as the kid who sang ABC, I Want You Back. I should be a new incredible actor, singer, dancer that will shock the world. I will do no interviews. I will be magic. I will be a perfectionist, a researcher, a trainer, a masterer. I will be better than every great actor roped into one." Off the Wall was Michael Jackson's first album to be produced by Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones had a background in jazz and composing film scores, so the label was actually kinda hesitant to bring on Quincy Jones as producer for Michael's next album. But Quincy and Michael had a vision, and it panned out in spades at the tail end of the 1970s with Off the Wall. In the documentary about the making of this album by Spike Lee, producer Mark Ronson says that in his own DJ sets, he has played no album more than Off the Wall, because it's just one of those albums that gets literally everyone dancing. Side A of the record is intimidatingly great dance music. We've got the absolutely iconic opener with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, then Rock With You, written by Rod Temperton, who would go on to write the song Thriller, Workin' Day and Night, and one of my personal favorites, Get on the Floor. During a time where the music industry was oversaturated and flooded with disco music that felt contrived and manufactured to capitalize on a trend, every second of this album, on the other hand, had soul to it, and it has an incredibly raw sound that makes it truly timeless. Notable tracks on Side B include the title track, Girlfriend, which was written by Paul McCartney, I Can't Help It, a song written by Stevie Wonder that was originally intended to be on his own magnum opus, Songs in the Key of Life, and then the closer, Burn This Disco Out. Neverland Ranch. Neverland Ranch was Michael Jackson's 2,700-acre property in Santa Barbara County, California, which he lived in from 1988 until 2005. When Michael moved in, he went all out, transforming the property by adding its own amusement park, zoo, railroads, and more. Michael would often talk about how he missed out on childhood, since he spent practically all of his life making music and performing. He was always working. Neverland Ranch, in his mind, was a way to heal that part of his childhood he never got to experience. And by the time he became the most famous person on the planet, the property became a place where he could retreat when the entire world wanted a piece of him. Among the many animals that lived at Neverland Ranch was Bubbles, Michael's pet chimpanzee, who is actually still alive at the time I'm recording this. In 2020, billionaire Ronald Burkle purchased the property. Lots of fans over the years have expressed wishes of having the place preserved or turned into a museum of some sort. But as of right now, none of that seems to be in the cards. 2009 death. I was 8 years old when Michael died, and I remember that day very vividly. It isn't talked about a lot under this lens, but I feel like tragically this was a truly culture-shifting moment. On the night of June 24th, 2009, Michael was rehearsing at the Staples Center in Los Angeles for his comeback residency, which I will touch on in its own entry later in the video. Early the next day, Michael returned to his home and went to bed. At the home with Michael was his personal physician, Conrad Murray, who Michael had hired as he was preparing to launch his comeback residency. Michael had been struggling with insomnia for quite some time, and Conrad Murray would often give him drugs to help him sleep. Once Michael went to bed early in the morning on June 25th, Murray gave Michael diazepam, lorazepam, and midazolam. Hours later, after Michael still couldn't fall asleep, He requested that Murray give him propofol, an anesthetic that Murray had given him to help him sleep before. At 10:40 a.m., Murray injected Michael with propofol, as he requested, and he fell asleep. Now, propofol is not a traditional sleep aid. It is an anesthetic frequently used in surgeries and other medical procedures. Once the drug is administered, the patient must be monitored, due to the drug's ability to destabilize blood pressure and breathing. According to Murray, after he administered the propofol, he went to the bathroom, and when he came back, he found that Michael had fallen into cardiac arrest and was unresponsive. A crucial detail to note is that Murray did not call 911 immediately after this happened. He later told police that, under those circumstances, to speak to a 911 operator would be to neglect. After finding Michael unresponsive, Murray attempted to revive him, performing CPR. He later called for help from other staffers working in Michael's home. And it was Michael's bodyguard, Alberto Alvarez, that ended up calling 911 at 12:21 p.m., over an hour after Murray found Michael unresponsive in his bed. Paramedics came to the home, performed CPR on Michael, then took him to a UCLA medical center, where Michael was pronounced dead that afternoon. In November of 2011, Conrad Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, he was released on parole in October of 2013. To this day, Conrad Murray still practices medicine in Trinidad and Tobago. We Are the World. We Are the World is the 1985 charity single co-written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, made to raise money for the Ethiopian famine in the early 1980s. For this song, a bunch of A-list artists got together in support of the cause, helping record the song. In addition to Michael, some of his siblings and Lionel Richie were Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, Billy Joel, Bob Dylan, Diana Ross, Bruce Springsteen, Ray Charles, and many more. This was a monumental moment in music because it brought so many legends across genres to unite for one good cause. The single was a huge success. To this day, it is one of the best-selling singles of all time, selling over 20 million physical copies and raising over $60 million. Pepsi commercial incident. In 1984, after inking a promotional deal with Pepsi, Michael and his brothers went to shoot a commercial for the brand. For this commercial, Michael and his brothers basically had a live performance set up at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles in front of 3,000 fans. With this performance came a setup of pyrotechnics set to go off during the performance, and during one of the takes, the pyrotechnics malfunctioned, with sparks reaching Michael's hair and setting it on fire, which led to second-degree burns on his scalp. This incident is significant not just because of how dangerous it was, but because it is often cited as the beginning of Michael's long struggle with prescription painkillers, as he reportedly continued to deal with pain from the burns in the years that followed. On top of this, there is a strange coincidence. The incident occurred almost exactly at the midpoint of Michael Jackson's life. 1993 Super Bowl halftime show. Here's another thing to add to the long list of things that Michael Jackson helped pioneer: the Super Bowl halftime show. Before the 1990s, the halftime show wouldn't be the huge spectacle from the biggest names in music as we know it today. Instead, they would often have a marching band, drill team, and other performances of the like. In an attempt to retain viewers, in the 1990s they began to book big-name artists to take over the halftime show. They first booked New Kids on the Block in 1991, but it was 2 years later, in 1993, that they went bigger and booked Michael Jackson, where the halftime show started to look closer to what we know it as today. If you go back and watch the performance now, you'll notice that his stage setup is much more minimal than what we're used to today. But that's because this halftime show was one of the first of its kind. There was no real precedent for an extravagant halftime show centered around one music artist, and Michael helped set that precedent with this iconic performance. All in all, despite the poor video quality that remains on YouTube, it is a great performance and a revolutionary moment for Jackson's career. As to this day, the Super Bowl is one of the biggest days in music because of the halftime show. While most performers do a career-spanning set, Michael mostly highlighted material off of his latest album at the time, Dangerous. with the only songs performed that were not from that album being Billie Jean and We Are the World. Also, shameless plug right here, but shortly after this video goes up, I'm gonna have a ranking of all the Super Bowl halftime shows on my Substack, The Wandering Beat, where I cover all sorts of music stuff. If you enjoy my work and want to read more about music, I would love it if you check that out. Link in the description. Dangerous. Michael Jackson's first album of the 1990s marked the end of his creative relationship with producer Quincy Jones. Because he wanted more independence as an artist, Michael chose to work with different producers and develop a new sound. For this album, Michael teamed up with producers Teddy Riley, Bill Bottrell, and Bruce Sweden. With these producers, Michael chased more of a New Jack Swing sound that defined the album. This album is a fan favorite and a personal favorite of mine as well. Up to this point in his career, Dangerous is definitely his most experimental album. Dangerous was released on November 21st, 1991. But before the album's release came the first single, Black or White, and its accompanying music video, directed by John Landis, who did the Thriller video. The premiere of the video on TV was another monumental moment for Michael, as it reportedly drew an estimated 500 million viewers worldwide. The second single, Remember the Time, is one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs that is on the more chill, atmospheric side of things. Accompanied by a cinematic music video taking place in ancient Egypt, and even featured appearances from Eddie Murphy, Iman, and Magic Johnson. Michael's run of singles from Dangerous wasn't quite the 5 back-to-back number ones he achieved with Bad, but they still did great numbers on the charts. In the Closet was the third single released from the album. I love this song because sonically it is one of the weirdest sounding singles he's done, and the music video is a fan favorite for sure. One of the other major singles was the opening track, Jam. This is a high energy tune that proves that Michael Jackson knows how to open an album better than almost anybody else. The music video notably features the other super famous and talented MJ, Michael Jordan. One other thing I would like to point out is the music video for the song Who Is It? The song is really, really great, but the music video has largely been forgotten about by the public, I feel, even though David Fincher directed it. It's a great video, definitely worth a watch. Notably, the release of Dangerous coincided with the rise of Nirvana, as their album Nevermind overtook Dangerous as the #1 album on the charts in January of 1992. This was significant because Michael Jackson was the most famous person in the world at the time, the biggest pop star, but not even his own album could stand in the way of Nirvana, who were absolutely dominating at the time. And I'm going to touch on this book later, but if you want to deep dive into this album, I highly recommend Susan Fast's 33 1/3 book on this album. In it, she basically makes the argument that this is his greatest album, alongside many other incredible insights, one of which I have an entry for in the Iceberg later. The Dangerous tour was another monumental tour for Michael, and certainly a fan favorite. It is worth noting, however, that he completely skipped the US on this tour, for personal reasons. It was on this tour that he pioneered the toaster, a stage mechanism that would allow him to come up from underneath the stage, launched into the air before standing completely still as the crowd cheers for minutes. It's absolutely iconic, and when I think of him as the king of pop, this is the image that usually comes to my mind. You could also see how someone like Billie Eilish took influence from Michael in her own live performances. On the Happier Than Ever tour, she came out on a toaster just like Michael did. And on the When We All Fall Asleep tour, she even came out and stayed still as audiences cheered, much like Michael did on the Dangerous tour. History. History, Past, Present, and Future, Book 1 was released on June 20th, 1995. History is a bit of a unique case of an album, in the sense that it is half greatest hits, half new original album. Disc 1, titled History Begins, is a compilation of MJ's greatest hits, and Disc 2, History Continues, is a whole new album of new material. In terms of quality, this album was another home run for Michael. Commercially, however, it marked a period where Michael was no longer operating at the unprecedented peak he had reached with Thriller and Bad, even though History still sold extraordinarily well. We'll touch on that more later. The first single released off the album was a sort of twofer, with tracks Scream and Childhood released on physical copies. Scream is the only real collaboration that Michael and his sister Janet ever did, but they absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. I think it is one of the very best songs in both Michael and Janet's catalogs.
Somebody please have mercy, 'cause I just can't take it. Stop pressuring me. Just stop pressuring me. Stop pressuring me. Make me want to scream. Stop pressuring me. Just stop. You just stop me. Stop pressuring me. You just.
While Scream is a high-energy banger, Childhood is a somber ballad that was featured as the theme song for Free Willy 2. The next single released was the ballad You Are Not Alone, which later became Michael's 13th #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100. The third single is one of Michael's greatest ballads in my opinion, Earth Song. The song and its music video address environmental destruction and animal welfare, two causes Michael was openly passionate about. The fourth single was They Don't Care About Us, the second track on the album, which kind of continues the passion, aggression, and anger introduced on the opening track, Scream. Famously, in the Spike Lee directed music video, Michael is seen walking through and dancing with locals in Salvador, Brazil, and in the Santa Marta favela of Rio de Janeiro. The final single off the album, Stranger in Moscow, isn't really part of the cultural canon for Michael Jackson songs, but I want to mention it because it is a fan favorite, and in my opinion, one of the most beautiful songs Michael ever released. And as a side note, if you are ever looking for a song to test headphones with, this is it. Invincible. I, along with much of the Michael Jackson fan community, absolutely adore this album. I think it is so underrated. Invincible, his 10th solo album, was released on October 30th, 2001. Tragically, this was Michael Jackson's last studio album he released in his lifetime. A big point of contention here was his battle with his record label, Sony. He did not want to tour the album, and in response, Michael said that Sony did not want to give the album the promotional push it deserved. So we got only one true Michael Jackson video for this era, the one for You Rock My World, despite the fact that Michael had visions and concepts for multiple music videos. It is a damn shame that we only got one proper video for this era. There was also the video for Cry, but that doesn't really count in my opinion because Michael wasn't even in it. You Rock My World peaked at only number 10, which is a pretty modest performance considering that this was a lead single to a brand new Michael Jackson album. But as I mentioned before, Michael was incredibly upset with how Sony handled the promotion of this album. They should have done more. Michael actually held this album in high regard alongside his other masterpieces, even telling USA Today in 2001 that Invincible is just as good or better than Thriller, in my true humble opinion. It has more to offer. Music is what lives and lasts. Invincible has been a great success. When the Nutcracker Suite was first introduced to the world, it totally bombed. What's important is how the story ends. What is really cool about this album is that we got to hear Michael experimenting with new sounds. One track that is incredibly divisive in the fan community is 2000 Watts, where his vocals are pitch shifted downward. I personally love the song.
Treble, stereo, control, high low, you go. Give them the juices flow. Press play, don't stop. Voltage, too hot, you feel I'm grilled. Everything you need, tell me what.
One of the most underappreciated aspects of Michael's artistry was his love for experimentation with new sounds. I'm sure after this album, when he was recording more music in the 2000s, he was experimenting more and more. I hope someday we get to hear some of it. Of all the albums I talked about in this video, the one the average viewer may not have listened to at all is probably Invincible. If that's the case for you, I suggest you go fix that immediately. This is it. This Is It was supposed to be Michael Jackson's big comeback. In March of 2009, Michael Jackson announced the 10-date residency at a press conference in London.
These will be my final show performances in London. This will be it. This is it. And when I say this is it, it really means this is it. Because, I'll be performing the songs my fans want to hear. This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call. I love you. I really do. You have to know that. I love you so much. Really. From the bottom of my heart. This is it. And see you in July.
With these being Jackson's first proper shows in years, demand for the tickets, understandably, was fucking insane. And they expanded the residency from just 10 shows to 50 shows at the O2 Arena in London. I hear fans and journalists make this mistake literally all the time. This Is It was not a tour, it was a residency. Do not call it a tour. I do believe that, had the shows happened, he definitely would have taken the show on the road and performed in other cities around the world. But at the time, it was just going to be these shows in London. With Michael's death on June 25th, 2009, less than 3 weeks before the first show of the residency, the shows were canceled. It is truly tragic that Michael didn't get to have his big comeback on stage. It is one of the greatest musical what-ifs. However, there is a documentary about the making of this residency and the rehearsals and what led up to it. Michael Jackson's This Is It, which was released in theaters in the fall of 2009. Due to the circumstances, this is the closest the fans got to seeing the This Is It show that Michael planned. I'm personally glad the documentary exists, just so the fans could see what Michael had in store for them. But it is obviously heartbreaking to watch, considering the circumstances. Prince, Paris, and Bigi. Prince, Paris, and Bigi are Michael Jackson's 3 children. When they were growing up, due to the extreme level of fame Michael lived under, the paparazzi would hound him virtually anywhere he went. So he would often cover their faces with masks to protect their privacy. The firstborn is Prince Jackson, who today does a great deal of philanthropic work. He co-founded the Heal Los Angeles Foundation, continuing the charitable legacy of his father. The second-born is Paris. She works as an actress, model, and singer, and is the only one of Michael's 3 children to pursue a professional music career. As of when I'm recording this, she has 1 studio album out, Wilted, released in 2020. Finally, there's Bigi, who many people may remember by the nickname Blanket. He appears to be the most private of the 3, and yeah, today he goes by the name Bigi. Prince Feud. Now, some of you probably are wondering why I have this up so high on the iceberg alongside a lot of these facts and history details. But my reasoning is this. I don't bring this up because I feel there was legitimate beef between the 2 artists. I bring this up because this is the comparison that will seemingly never die. Prince versus Michael Jackson. It was more of a soft rivalry in a sort of competitive sense. Both artists had their huge moments close together. Thriller came out in 1982 with the success of the videos continuing until 1983, and then Prince released Purple Rain, the album and the film, in 1984, and that album and its singles took over the charts at the time heavily. Anyways, when Michael was making the Bad album, he actually wanted to make the title track a duet with Prince, but he declined. In the 90s, Chris Rock interviewed Prince, and Prince said why he declined.
This is the story of you turning down Bad.
Well, you know, that Wesley Snipes character,
right.
that would have been me. All right, now you run that video in your mind. The first line of that song is "Your butt is mine."
Your butt is mine.
Now I said, who gonna sing that to whom? Cause you sure ain't singing it to me, and I sure ain't singing it to you. So right there we got, right there we got a problem.
Prince also reportedly declined participating in We Are the World as well. Prince and Michael were on stage together during a 1983 performance with James Brown, however. At the end of the day, while both artists were incredibly popular, in terms of global reach, it's not even close. Nobody was ever as big as Michael Jackson. And that's all for Layer 1. Before I wrap things up, I just want to briefly mention my Ko-fi page, in case any of you would like to support my work directly. As of right now, only one YouTube video on my channel is monetized, and this video definitely will not be due to the heavy use of copyrighted music, but honestly, I'm fine with that for this video because I genuinely feel that the music is an essential part of telling Michael's story. There's absolutely no pressure at all, but if you'd like to support the time and research that goes into these videos, the link will be in the description. Layer 2 should be up in February. See you then.